There we go. We're recording now too.
All right. So Lydia, are you seeing my good screen or my?
I'm seeing your slides.
All right, but not in the presenter or in the presenter mode?
Not in presenter mode, no. Or I'm as it could be for a viewer. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I hear the bells of Montana Hall are ringing. Are we recording?
Yes, we are recording. I'm good to go.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. It seems like it's 10 o'clock. It's Monday morning. Good morning and happy Monday. My name's Dan Clark. I'm the Director of Local Government Center. Joining me is Lydia Mounts, and she is Associate Specialist. And we are doing one of our bi-weekly study commissioner training programs. And today's topic we're going to cover is the self-governing powers and charters. So apparently with this webinar that we're hosting, this is being recorded, and you will be able to watch this at some other time, in the future. As soon as it is rendered, we will email and make this link available to everyone. Also, I will say that you're unable to unmute and speak. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask or comment about, please use the chat. And Lydia is watching the chat, and she'll interrupt me, and we'll discuss your questions. And this is material and content that we've covered in the past. Now, that doesn't mean that you have been exposed to it. So some of you may have just joined your study commission lately as an appointee, and we appreciate your service and hope that you will have a good experience doing this, and we're here to help and support you through the study review, the local government review. So don't hesitate to ask questions, not only during this session, but also reach out to us and we'll see what we can do to help you. So let's get launching into the topic of the day. Today, like I said, is self-governing powers and charters. We've got a couple of three objectives. We first want to understand the difference between self-governing powers and general governing powers. What is a charter, and then what is contained inside a charter? So that's the things we'll cover today in our presentation. I want to draw your attention to our website. So if you go to msulocalgov.org, you will find this landing page. And if you look down on those, you've got what, 8 icons down below. And if you are interested in looking at a municipal charter or the one of the 4 county charters, you can click on this button here, and it'll take you to a list of all the different counties and their municipalities and those that have charters. There's about 36 or so local governments that currently operate with a charter form of government. So that's a place where you can go to access that. There's also other information, FAQs, and access to these webinars, and a resource library available to you as well on our website. So we encourage you to go and explore and check that out. So let's start in this process. So if you are a community, a city or a county, that if you're aware of or know that you do not have self-governing powers or a charter, then you have the default form or power of government. So the default powers that everyone started out with in 1972 after our Constitution was adopted, and everyone went through the first voter review process in 1974 to 76. Every city and county started out with general governing powers, and then it had to be an affirmative vote by the electorate, by those people in that jurisdiction, had to choose to adopt self-governing powers or a charter. So everyone starts at this point with general governing powers. It's constitutionally derived. You can see here in Article 11 of our Constitution, Sections 4. And this is general governing powers, and the next one, self-governing powers. But basically what that means, if you're a city or a county, but you can only operate or exercise powers that are granted to you by the law, the Constitution of the state. So if the state or the legislature hasn't specifically granted you a power to do something, then the assumption is you do not have that power. So yeah, so that's what that means. Self-governing powers, however, is you can exercise any power that's not specifically prohibited by the law or the Constitution. So that's more expansive. So to give you some sort of a graphic representation, if you look at this, the green circle, if you are a general governing powers community or city or county, you can only operate and exercise powers that are inside that green circle. If you have self-governing powers, you can exercise the powers that are inside that green circle, as well as any other powers that are legitimate for a local government to exercise, except for those powers in the red circle or oval. Those are the powers that are denied. So that's a way for you to kind of get a better sense of what that might look like. Green represents general governing powers. That's all you have is inside that oval. But if you have self-governing powers, it's pretty expansive. You can do everything that any other general governing powers community can do, as well as any other thing that would have a local government purpose, except for the things that are denied. Now, the things that are denied, like you cannot adopt a local option tax. You can't change the laws for the voter voting process. Some of those things, the state says we reserve the powers to define and regulate, say, voting around the state. So not every local government that has self-governing powers can change that. And that makes sense to have some consistency around the state. So the state is reserving certain powers to themselves, but outside of that, it's pretty much anything that makes has a local government purpose is within your grasp. Right. We have what we call a shared powers model rather than a home rule. Local governments share in their sovereignty with the state, whereas a home rule, we are not a home rule state, although if you strictly define home rule, so that's where specific powers are granted to a local government, or it's limiting your powers of the legislature to intervene. But in our case, we have all powers except those that are prohibited by the legislature. So we're sharing in our sovereignty. The local government has self-governing powers as a sovereign governing body, and it shares that sovereignty with the state. And it can exercise any power that's not prohibited or excluded. And you can read about this. This is one of the Supreme Court case rulings that was in the early 80s. So this is case law that was first established in trying to figure out what does this shared governance model look like, shared sovereignty model. And in Madison County, there was a lawsuit that Madison County was one of the first to adopt self-governing powers. They had a charter. They have since repealed that or changed it and gone back to general governing powers. But in that ruling, it says legislative control over counties was supreme in the previous 1889 Constitution. So the powers that the state was supreme, and they had control over counties. The counties could only exercise those powers that were expressly granted them by the state. That's a general governing powers model. That's what all counties and cities had from 1889 all the way up to 1972, when each jurisdiction could vote to change that. It went on to say that the 1972 Montana Constitution opened the local government units to new vistas of shared sovereignty with the state. Went on to say the Constitution provides that a local government unit may act under self-government charter with its powers uninhibited, except by express prohibition of the Constitution, law, or the charter. So it's just another way for us to understand better how that self-governing powers looks. So here's some examples of self-governing powers, right? So what could we do with that? Why is that important? Why are we interested in having that? Well, I'd like to think that if there is an issue or a challenge or a problem that your particular community is facing, that the state legislature hasn't contemplated, that you would have a need that could be addressed. So they haven't given you a specific power. or there's a power that's just unique to, or a need that you have that's unique to your jurisdiction, that no other county or city has that, or not very many. So you're unable to reach out and address that issue because you don't have this specific authority because the legislature hadn't given it to you. That's your general governing powers model. And it can be frustrating for citizens and for the local government to want to step into a space and do something, but they can't because the legislature hasn't given them that authority. And the legislature is not particularly interested in granting a specific authority when it only is going to impact or affect one or two jurisdictions. So they're going to say, look, you have the option. You can adopt self-governing powers and you can deal with this on your own. Just go to the ballot box and vote to adopt that power. So I think that's a really nice and elegant solution to that problem, where the legislature shouldn't or need to be dealing with all the little issues that are expressed around the state in all these small jurisdictions. So a greater authority to dispose of lands, implement development fees. Now, this was an example where the cities and the counties adopted, that had local self-governing powers, adopted local government, implemented local development fees. And that was such a good idea. So that these local development fees, what they look like is if you have a development that's going in, rather than having the existing ratepayers or taxpayers pay for the expansion of a water plant or a sewer plant to accommodate this new development, they can charge an impact fee to that development. And that impact fee then would offset, it's paid by the developer, and it would offset the cost of that new development. And that was had such great success in those communities that had self-governing powers that the legislature then decided to expand that authority and allow all cities and counties to implement an impact fee. So I think that's a really good example of this relationship between the cities and counties and local governments and the state, that when there is a elegant solution to a local problem that seems to be shared by others, the state will step in and say, well, why don't we grant that across the state to everybody? So that's an example where self-governing powers turned into general governing powers. Here's some other examples of other things that local governments had exercised specific authorities, and they either, the attorney general or the courts decided that yes, indeed, these are examples of self-governing powers. So the authority for a city or county government to acquire and operate an electric and natural gas utility. You'll notice that in the Montana Code Annotated, nowhere does it give a local government the authority to operate a gas utility or electric utility. So in order to operate one of those utilities, they would have to adopt self-governing powers. And we have a couple of municipalities in the state that do that. We have Troy that has an electric utility, and Saco that operates a gas utility. So those are just some examples of self-governing powers that are not existing in the statutes for all general governing powers municipalities. Here are some other powers that are denied or requires delegation by the state in order for you to exercise, and that's the power to authorize a tax on income or sale of goods, so like a sales tax. That's the state says, no, if we're going to have a sales tax, it's going to be implemented at the state level, or allow local governments to do that by a vote, similar like the resort tax. But that's an authority that's reserved to the state. And so those that have self-governing powers cannot step into that space and say, we're going to adopt our own sales tax. You can't change the rate or a price of a fee or a permit that the state agency already, so like DEQ has a permitting fee. You can't, with self-governing powers, change that permitting fee. So those are just a few examples. You can't change the election laws, those types of things. I think we'll have that here. Yeah, laws regulating budget, finance, borrowing procedures. That's something that the state says, no, all local governments are going to follow this. Laws regulating election or changing or modifying planning and zoning. Again, those are laws that have been established by the state that we in local governments need to follow. So that's self-governing powers. Now, general governing powers, municipalities and counties cannot adopt a charter. A charter form of government is only available to those that have self-governing powers. But a city or county can adopt self-governing powers without a charter. So a charter basically is just a description of the structure of government that you're operating with. So if you're currently operating with a mayor council form of government or the commission executive form, you could adopt self-governing powers. And you could still operate with the statutory framework that is defined in the commission executive form or the mayor council form of government, but just add self-governing powers. Or you could adopt a charter and self-governing powers, and then you can structure in that charter, like your local constitution, how is the executive legislative branch is going to be developed, or what powers and authorities and relationship are they going to have. So think of your charter as a local constitution that defines the powers and duties and responsibilities of the local government and its authorities. So you'll see here in the Constitution, this again is a constitutionally derived authority. It says the legislature shall provide procedures for local government units to frame, adopt, amend, revise, or abandon a self-government charter with the approval of majority of those voting on the question. So it's a vote of the people are the ones that are going to adopt a charter, and the procedures shall not require the approval of the charter of a legislative body. So the city council doesn't have to approve the charter, or the legislature isn't going to approve the charter. The people who approve the charter are going to be the electorate or the voters in that jurisdiction. The charter provisions establish the executive, legislative, and administrative structures and organization are superior to statutory provisions. So you will outline in your charter, this is what we want the executive branch to look like, how we want them to operate, what their powers are, how they're elected, partisan or nonpartisan. I think I have this all on slides. There we go. Power, structures, duties, and limitations of that local government. And really that charter is going to define the executive, legislative branches plus whatever other administrative duties that the city or county is going to adopt. Let's see, where do we go here? So the written plan of government. It's going to look at the legislative body. So what's the legislative body going to consist of? Is it 3 members, 5 members, 7, 9, 12 members, or 11 members? Are they elected? How are they elected? Are they elected from districts or wards? Are they elected at large? What's the term of office? Is it going to be 2 years, 4 years, 6-year terms? Are they partisan or nonpartisan? How do we remove them, or how do we define what a vacancy is? And then the method for filling the vacancies. So all that is spelled out in your charter. Or, like I said before, you could operate with all that statutory framework that's outlined in the Montana Code Annotated, that defines all this for you in the structure of government, and just adopt self-governing powers. So, and I guess I'll just say this. You ready? Buckle up, folks. I'm becoming less bully, but less excited or enamored with the charter. Unless there's something really unique or different that you want to do, that a charter would be appropriate. If you're happy with the structure and organization of your local government, you would just like self-governing powers, then I would suggest just adopt that. There are 44, I want to say, municipalities that have self-governing powers, and 32 of them that have charters. So there's about 10 or 12 of them out there that still operate with the same structure as outlined in the statute for the structure of government, mayor, council, or the commission manager form of government. And so they haven't seen a need to adopt a charter that goes through and defines all this. And oftentimes what you'll see in a charter is that they just take the statutory framework that's outlined in the law and they just put it in the charter, which is easy to do. But it makes you just think, well, why create the charter if it's going to be exactly like what it says in the state statute? It just seems to be one extra step, and creates an additional conversation with your public that they may not see. Well, what's the point if we're going to look and operate and exist exactly like we were before? We just now have a charter. What's the advantage of the charter? I think the real advantage is the self-governing powers. So I'm looking at you, Lydia. Did that make sense? Or are you even paying attention to what I'm saying?
Yes, it did make sense. I am paying
Okay.
attention. It did make
Okay.
sense.
So I'm less bully on that whole idea of the charter. I think 10 years ago when we did this, we're like, yeah, the self-governing powers in a charter, that's the apex. And I'm really thinking, I don't know. I just think the self-governing powers is the apex. It's the top of the food chain, if you will, of governing in the state of Montana that gives you the most flexibility and the most responsiveness to your local government. The charter is nice. And I think places like Billings or Bozeman, where they've added some very specific things to their charter that aren't options within the state framework of the government, the structure of government. And that's where, for example, Bozeman wrote in their charter that they mandate every year ethics training for all their elected officials, appointed officials, and staff. So they have to go through an ethics training every year. That's not something that's required in the law, but they couldn't make that as an expectation. I guess they could have passed it by an ordinance, but it's really now embedded in their constitution. And in order for that to change, the voters have to say, yeah, we want to remove this requirement for everybody to be trained in ethics annually. So it has a stronger impact in that community than if it were just done by an ordinance, because that ordinance can be repealed just by the vote of the city council. But in order to repeal this from a charter, it has to go to a vote of the people. So the whole community, a majority of the community has to agree to that. So those things I would see, yes, if you want to add, say, we're going to require or mandate all of our city council members to attend certain hours of training every year. If you did that in your charter, then that would hold those individuals accountable for fulfilling that expectation for maintaining office. And if they don't hit that number of hours required for training annually, then that would create a vacancy. So that would be something you can define in your charter that isn't giving you an option in the state statute and has a stronger, more lasting impact in the community than if it were done just by a ordinance. Is that making sense, Lydia? All right, you're my litmus test. So I'm hoping if that's not making sense, just type in the chat. All right, so I kind of went off on a side tangent there, but so these are the expectations that you're going to put in your charter. And like I said, typically what they'll do is they look in the form of government that the local government operates at right now. So most municipalities, we'll just pick on cities and towns right now. Most municipalities are the mayor council form of government. And there is a recipe and there is a default sub options within the law that defines what that relationship looks like. What they've done is they've just taken that statutory framework and they've just slid it into their charter. So they look exactly like they did before. It's an easy sell to the public. Hey, we're not going to change the way we're structured at all. And if that's the case, well, then why bother with the charter? Okay, all right, enough said on that. So this is the legislative body for the elected for the executive side of the equation, right? The legislative side is always elected, right? They're always elected. On the executive side, you have options. Are they going to be elected or are they going to be appointed, like a city manager, city administrator? What's the term of office? How are they removed if they're appointed, right? What's the appointment process and what's the removal process? What are the powers and duties of the chief executive? Grounds for removal, could they provide a plural executive, which means like a commission presiding officer, where they serve as a member of the legislative body, and then are appointed to serve also as the chief executive, like Virginia City. So Virginia City has a charter and self-governing powers, and in their charter, their mayor is a plural executive. Their mayor was elected as a city council member, and then the city council elected that individual to serve as the chief executive. So they're doing two duties. One is they are a member of the legislative branch. They participate in the discussion. They vote on measures during city council members. So they're acting like a legislator. So they're wearing that legislator hat. and they facilitate the meeting like they were the mayor. So they run the meeting like they're the mayor, but they can also participate like they're a legislator. And then when the meeting is over and the legislative body disbands, that elected mayor then chief executive becomes the mayor of the town and is responsible for doing all the executive functions of implementing, managing staff, implementing policy, and managing staff. So that's that plural executive. Or it could be like a council, the commission, the county commission. County commissions are plural executive. They're elected city council, or they're elected as county commissioners, the legislative body, and they're also act as the executive. And that's the body is the executive. Whereas in the commission presiding officer, you have an individual that's the executive. But the county commission, it's the whole body acts as the executive, which creates more challenge when you have 3 members of a governing body who also is trying to act like the chief executive as a body. I'm hoping this is not confusing. Maybe I'm getting too deep into the weeds. All right, I've got 5 minutes to wrap this up. Let's see what we got.
Dan, we've got a question before you jump into the next slide, if you don't mind. This question asks, wouldn't a well-written charter protect the community from possible overreach and help prevent issues between local governance and community?
Yeah, yes. I think well-defined relationships that define what are the duties. And let me go back to the slide here. So I think if you look at these 2 circles, they are overlapping. They're both unique branches of government. They have independent responsibilities and duties that are well defined in your charter. However, in our structure of government in the United States, where how we've organized ourselves, we have this overlap. And that overlap is where we share in responsibilities, right? So in an example of that shared responsibilities or where we share in our powers is, we'll look at the president, we'll look at the mayor, and we look at the governor. They all will appoint their department heads or cabinet with the consent of the Senate or the consent of the governing body. So the governor appoints the department heads of the state agencies, and the Senate approves those appointments. It's the same with the department heads in your municipality. The mayor appoints the public works head, the public works director, with the consent of the majority of the council, but hires all other staff without the consent of the council. So what we're doing is we're defining that relationship. And I think a well-defined charter helps to understand that relationship to minimize tension. Now, you mentioned something in that question about the relationship with the community.
It asks if it would also help prevent issues between local governance and community.
Yeah, trying to. Yeah, because there are certain powers the local government has, and so they can exercise those powers, and they often have to adopt policies, either resolutions or ordinances to define how that municipality or county is going to exercise that authority that's given to them. So part of this, so when we hear about overreach, most of the challenges I've seen when we talk about quote unquote overreach of local government, it's not so much of the failure of the charter or the structure of government, but that's a failure of individual people. And this process doesn't deal with the people. And so when people are acting outside their course and scope or doing things that are inconsistent with the law, a charter or the local government review isn't going to fix that. And it's not because there's a lack of clarity in the law, it's because people choose not to follow the law. So it's not a failure of the structure or the way the government's defined, it's our failure as citizens that we're not electing people or holding them accountable for their office. So that's what I would say. It's, in my experience, it's not so much that there's a lack of understanding or a lack of clarity. There's a lack of willingness to either hold people accountable, to stay in their lane, yeah, we're not electing good people. I don't know if that answered the question. Little commentary there from me, but I will say this, that a poorly written charter is going to be the bane of your existence. So it's got to be well written. Otherwise, where there's ambiguity in the words, you're going to fight over that for the next 10 years until the next voter review. And I'll look at West Yellowstone. They've had this will be the third voter review that they've done in 30 years, and each time they do it, they will take note of their charter. And where is there's language in the charter that when it's applied in a certain situation, they realize, oh my goodness, that language is ambiguous. It's unclear what it's meant, or it could mean multiple things. When they wrote it, they had a particular situation in mind, and they wrote the language of that charter with a particular situation in mind. But then when a different situation presents itself and you look at that language, you realize, oh, that's less clear now. And so they take note of that during that 10-year cycle of applying that charter, and then they vote for another voter review, and they go back in and they surgically review and think about, okay, what are the different contexts that this language could be applied, and how do we make it more meaningful or more clear? And so I think they've done a really good job in clarifying their charter. And it's just little wordsmithing now as they're getting kind of the gross parts of it, right? The major legislative and executive branches are fairly well defined. It's this overlap between those two offices that they're really trying to become more artful in the way they use their language in that charter to make it more clear whose lane is this, right? And that's important. Or we have a shared responsibility, and now let's create a policy that defines what that shared responsibility looks like. So yeah, I think a well-written charter is going to be very, very helpful. And I'll tell you, there's a few charters out there that I will say that are not well written, that create ambiguity, or I would say that take that balance and they make that legislative branch way too big and that executive branch way too small. And that balance of power now becomes problematic. And then you have a legislative branch it's unclear, is this our responsibility to be executing this, or is it the mayor's responsibility, because our charter is poorly written. So in those communities, we're more than happy to help them figure out and think about, how do we restore balance between those two branches of government. And I would like to think that the default sub options that you'll find in the statutes, in the Montana Code Annotated, have struck a very elegant balance between those two branches of government. And that's why I think it's important, when we're thinking about creating a charter, look at that as a template. And if there's things that you want to add that you can't add currently with that structure, well, then let's create the charter. Anyway.
We've got another great question. Did you want to just wrap up your slides and then do questions at the end, or do you want to just, are you good to take questions now?
Well, I think I've got 3 or 4 or 5 more slides. All right, so we talked about the legislative body. We talked about the same expectations for the chief executive. How do we remove them? Term of office, partisan, nonpartisan. It might also specify other departments. My suggestion is to be less specific there, allowing the city to morph and grow and create without this really heavy-handed structure defined in your charter. But just say the city can create agencies or departments as they deem necessary in the future. That way, it's not inhibiting the ability of the city to respond to the citizens' needs by putting a very strict structure in place that can in the future be inhibiting. So I'm a guy that likes my options to be available to me. Many communities like Billings is operating with a charter that has very strict things that are now creating real problems for it 50 years later. And it's going to take a change to that charter in order for them to progress as a municipality in certain aspects. All right. Charter may not create provisions that conflict with state law or anything to do with elections, initiatives, referendum procedures. We would also say, not that there isn't a couple charters out there, that this establishing elections and qualifications for elected officials, that's very specific in the 71113. My concern is if we're putting in their term limits for elected officials. I know Billings has it. No one's challenged it. But I think if you were to read that provision, and it could be argued that by putting a term limit to an office, that you're affecting the qualifications for someone to run for office. So that's our interpretation. So our recommendation is to, we would recommend you don't put term limits in your charter, because we don't believe, but we're not attorneys, we don't believe it is it would be consistent with the state statute about it affecting access to elections. Anyway, that we're not attorneys, so if you're going to go down that path, we would recommend you get a legal opinion from your attorney, city or county attorney. Provisions established or modifying the court system, those are all set by state law. You can't mess with that. They may be amended by voter approval. Every charter must adopt self-governing powers. You can't have a charter without self-governing powers. However, like I said before, you can have self-governing powers without a charter. There's the census in the state. I think as of now, counties, we have 4 charters out there. Petroleum County is the newest that joined the ranks about 2 years ago. Let's see. Over here on this municipalities, yep, 42 have self-governing powers, and charters, what do we have there? 33? 32? Is that math right? 10, yeah, 32 have charters. So that means 10 municipalities like Wolf Point, for example, has self-governing powers, but no charter, as an example of a municipality that still operates with the statutory framework that's outlined for the commission executive form of government, but they have self-governing powers. I think that is it. We'll now entertain questions. So yeah, Lydia, what do we have?
We have, does the county need self-governing powers to switch to nonpartisan elections for all county offices?
So with counties on partisan, nonpartisan, it's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. Either you're nonpartisan or you're partisan, and you don't have the ability to separate out. And I hear what you're saying, because some people say, yes, we want the county commission to be partisan, but all these other elected officials, like the clerk and recorder, clerk of district court, treasurer, sheriff, county attorney, there's not a lot, because they're administrative in function. There might be an argument about the sheriff, but you know, a clerk and recorder says, I do my job. I administer what the law says, and that is nonpartisan. There's no partisanship in how I deal with marriage certificates, or with the clerk of district court. Marriage certificates, death certificates, that is not a partisan issue. So why am I running on a partisan platform? So there's a good argument there, but you cannot separate that out with general governing powers. The only way you can do that would be likely through a charter. I think you'd have to adopt a charter form of government. It's not something that you could do with just self-governing powers, because that's a structure of government. So it would, they would have to adopt self-governing powers. I think the easiest way would have self-governing powers in a charter.
Clarification for that last. She said,
Okay.
I am talking about all nonpartisan. So
Okay, so
yeah.
if you want everybody to be nonpartisan, yeah, you can do that right now. You can do that without even doing it through the voter review. You can just, at any point, the county commission can ask the voters if they want to go to nonpartisan. But this would be a great time to have that conversation in your community. And so you don't have to adopt that as part of your plan of government right now. As a, let's see if I can get out of this. Stop sharing there. Would you like me to show you where that's found? I can actually give you the statute. Da, 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 da. But yeah, is there another question while I'm looking this up?
Yes, the next question is asking if they recommend keeping the current government and adding self-governing powers without a charter. If a few years down the road, we see advantages to combining consolidating city and county governments, do we have to wait 10 years for the next voter review to bring that to the voters? Or can we do the education of the public voters and add that recommendation to the next regularly scheduled vote?
Gosh, say that again. That
If
almost there. I want to make sure I'm
So,
correct.
okay, recommending keeping current government and adding self-governing powers without a charter now.
Yep.
And then 2 years down the road, if there seem to be advantages to combining or consolidating the city, county governments. He's asking, do we have to wait for the next voter review cycle to bring that to the voters? Or can we do the education of the public and the voters and add that recommendation to the next regularly scheduled vote?
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So let me see if I can. Let me know if I'm not scratching your itch here. So I would recommend anybody. So I guess I don't I'm not advocating. So I guess if you say that, I'm not advocating, but I think it would be a good idea, right? So that sounds like I'm advocating. If everybody had self-governing powers, I don't see any disadvantage to having self-governing powers. And there are some counties that have self-governing powers that there's only a handful of times that they ever exercise it, but there's like, I don't see why, talk to Ross, Ross, he's county commissioner in Fergus County. He'll say, I don't know why you wouldn't want to have it. He says, we don't use it all that often, but when we do, it makes our lives so much easier because we can do something that we couldn't do otherwise. So that's kind of his take on it. They've had self-governing powers. I think they're coming on 30 years now in Fergus County. I think they adopted it in the 80s. Is that right? Or 90s? Anyway, 20 or 30 years. The consolidation, you can do that midstream. I'll say it midstream, in between the 2 10-year cycles. You can do that at any time. But what you would, I say that, I think you'd need to have both city and counties. The city and the county would have to probably impanel and vote to create a study commission or a joint study commission. I'll have to look into that to see what consolidation would look like off cycle. It's easier to do it during the 10-year cycle, but having self-governing powers won't add that advantage to that either way. So that would be a separate thing. So the consolidation discussion of consolidated city county government would be independent of whether you had self-governing powers or general governing powers. Those are two separate things that happen independently of each other. And by having self-governing powers won't give you any greater advantage to taking care of or dealing with this issue. The only thing I could see is if the city and county, both of them had self-governing powers, then there might be maybe make that process a little bit easier to where you could define your own process of consolidation that isn't strictly defined in Title VII, Chapter 3, Part 1. There you go.
He added a clarification note saying his concern is that changing to self-governing powers and form of government might be too much to ask of the voters in one vote.
Oh, yeah. So those are always challenges because there's some nuance to that conversation with the voters and helping them really understand. It is not an uncommon thing to have happen that, particularly with counties that are their original elected county officials form, that they want to change something about the way their commissioners are elected. They want to go from elected from nominated from districts and elected at large to elected from districts. Something simple like that. Everybody loves the idea, but in order to make that change, you have to shift your form of government from the elected county officials form to the commission form and then adopt that change. So there's two questions you're asking. We want to change our form of government and we want to change how we elect our elected officials. Everybody loves this idea of changing the way we elect our officials. However, they don't understand this difference between elected county officials form and the commission form. This commission form has to be voted on and adopted in order to do this other thing. They're connected. So I was just looking at Gallatin counties. They had 6 things that were placed on their, or 4 things that were placed on their ballot. All 4 things passed. So they loved all the proposed changes, but they didn't adopt the commission form of government. And none of those things can happen under the elected county officials form. So since they didn't adopt the commission form of government, none of those things that they all, by a strong majority, wanted to have happen didn't happen because they didn't adopt the commission form. That's a kind of a nuanced conversation. So this study commission this year is really trying to figure out, how do we make it clear to the voters that they need to make this change in order to do all these other things they want. So yeah, it's kind of a challenging conversation if you're going to be looking at self-governing powers, and the more things you add there, the more nuance you have, the more challenge it's going to be. We're, like I said, we're happy to come out and meet with your public, to help people understand those nuances and those changes and what they mean and what their vote is going to mean. If they vote for X, Y, Z, this is what you're going to get. Anyway, so we're happy to help communicate that and support you in sharing that with your public. I hope that answered some of the question. Very helpful. Oh, good. Glad that helped, Greg. Okay, can some elected official jobs in current form of government be switched to appointed positions in order to have more job requirements? Okay, good question. All right. Joanne's coming in with lots of good questions. Okay, so Joanne, what county are you in? I should know this because your name sounds very familiar to me. That's right. All right, Joanne. Daniels County. All right. So right now in Daniels County, you're elected county officials form of government. And the only way that you can change those elected officers to being appointed is if you adopt the commission form. So if you just adopted the commission form, then you can adopt. So let me share with you. Okay, share. I pulled this up. I was going to show you earlier. Share. Hang with me, folks. We got, I don't know, 13 minutes. I'm happy to stay here as long as you want to ask questions. Let me do this too. Let me pull this one up. I'm going to pull up the elected county officials form. All right. Can you see that now, the ECOF with the yellow on it? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So all so Joanne and all the folks that are on the call that are counties, unless you are Ferguson, well, the 2 consolidated city county governments that are doing the voter review, you guys are different because you have charters. You're a whole different class. But everybody else, other than other than Fergus and Petroleum County, this is your form of government, and it is the elected county officials form. This is your default. You haven't changed, I don't think. Maybe some of you might have changed, but we'll assume you haven't. So these defaults here, right? All these ones, you can't change those ones. Those are locked in. Because you are the elected county officials form of government, all these ones that you have listed here, if you scroll down, legal officer, your county attorney may be elected. Law enforcement, sheriff, elected. Clerk and recorder, elected. Now you can consolidate those. You can say, we're going to have the clerk and recorder and the surveyor and the superintendent of schools all one elected position. but they're all elected. The only way you can adopt one of these others, right, one of those other options, is if you adopt the commission form of government, right? The commission form of government is a different form of government. So elected county officials use your default. In order to make any change to modify any of these numbers, you have to ask the voters, we would like to adopt the commission form of government and make one of these changes. So you'd say on the ballot, do you want to retain the existing form of government, the elected county officials form, or adopt the alternative commission form of government with the treasurer being appointed? So where is that? So it would be appointed by the local government commission or any one of these options here. So you don't have to adopt self-governing powers in order to do that. You just need to ask the voters, we need to adopt commission form, and then you can do all these different sub options. Ask them if they say yes to the commission, then all these sub options are available. But you can't change any of those numbers that were listed before on that long list. With those are all locked in with the elected county officials form. In order to change them, you have to adopt the commission form to modify any of that. I hope that made sense. Joanne, did that make sense? So that's elected county officials form. Let me throw up here, or put up. Throw up sounds very. All right. So the way I did this handout, and I don't like that handout I was just showing you either. Anyway, so this handout, you'll notice, doesn't have anything marked on it. There's nothing in bold. So this shows if you adopt the commission form of government, see the commission form of government, if you adopt that, then all of these sub options are available to you. So it's like your choose your own adventure. What do we, oop, there's one that's supposed to be undone. Sorry, that's supposed to be changed. Now, here's another thing. Where does it say it? And I'm going to give credit to Lydia here because she saw this and brought it to our attention that I hadn't realized before. So it's right here in 73402, the nature of government. Why can't I? It says the local government that adopts this form shall have general governing powers. So the way we're reading this right now, and we need to chat with some attorneys on this, but the way we're reading this is you can't have self-governing powers. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can't have self-governing powers and adopt the charter form of government. You can't operate with this statutory framework. It's outlined in Title 73400s with self-governing powers, because it says here that you shall have general governing powers. All the other forms of government say that you can have self-governing powers or general governing powers. Is that right, Lydia? And this is the only one that says you shall have. So in order for you to have self-governing powers, you would have, and you want to stay with this form of government, the commission form, you have to adopt a charter. That's why Fergus County and Petroleum Counties both adopted charters rather than just saying, hey, we want self-governing powers. So they look just like, let me jump back to here. So Petroleum County, now scratch Petroleum County because they're commission manager form, but they anyway, they're different. Fergus County, they liked their structure of government. They just wanted self-governing powers. They liked how they're organized, but they wanted self-governing powers. So in order for them to maintain this structure of government that's outlined here in bold, they had, and they wanted self-governing powers, they had to adopt a charter. So what they did in their charter is they just took all these bolded sections of the statute and they migrated them into their charter. So they look exactly like they did before when they're the elected county officials forum, but now they have a charter and self-governing powers. I'm hoping this is making sense. Why are we doing this on a Monday morning?
I know.
It's like a Thursday afternoon when our brains are working really well. And
Yep, things are all in gear. We have a couple more questions that have popped up. First one is two-part question. So one, we don't have to be self-governing. And two, if we adopt the commission form, does that need to be approved by the voters, or do the commissioners have that duty?
so everything's going to go to the voters. Anything that deals with these frameworks, with the form of government, any changes you're proposing will have to go to the voters. So if you're changing from partisan to nonpartisan, has to go to the voters. If you're changing that, we want the treasurer to be appointed and we want the clerk and recorder to be appointed, but we want the sheriff elected, that all has to go to the voters. But in order to ask those questions about those people to be appointed, you would have to adopt the commission form of government. And if you want to take it one step further, if you want to have a commission form of government and make those people appointed, that's how, I'll tell you this, Petroleum County's charter. I'll go on our website and look at Petroleum County's charter. They have all those officers are hired by the commission. The only elected people in Petroleum County are the 3 county commissioners. I think the sheriff, I don't think the sheriff is elected. I think everybody else is appointed by the county commissioners. And so they have self-governing powers. They have the commission form is the framework, but instead of having these people being elected, they now are maybe appointed by the local government commission. That's the way their charter reads. So because they historically had been manager form of government where they were already used to having those people, those department heads were hired by the manager. And so they liked that. They didn't want to have to go back and find within that town or that county of 500 people, folks that were willing to be the treasurer. They wanted to hire people to do those jobs and not rely on the elected, the voters to be elected. So I would encourage you to look at Fergus counties and Petroleum counties. They're different in that the thing that makes them different is how those line officers are assume those offices. In Fergus County, they're elected, and in Petroleum County, they're appointed.
Okay, one more question here. Clarification about city-county consolidation. In order to have that consolidation, do we have to adopt the commission form, and that would be general governing powers?
So if you're going to go through and do a consolidation, if you're going to go through that hassle, so I would suggest you look at the 2 consolidated city-county governments. You can do any style of government you want. Anaconda, Deer Lodge, Butte, Silver Bow, they have chosen to have the commission executive form of government where they have an elected chief executive and an elected city council or county commission. In Butte, Silver Bow, they have, was it like 10 or 12 commissioners and an elected chief executive. So they call him a chief executive. Think of it as a mayor, however you want to think of that. And same with Anaconda, they have 5 commissioners and an elected chief executive. So but that's what they chose back in the day. They could still maintain the commission form if they wanted to, and have 3 elected county commissioners to operate, or go to 5 county commissioners to operate. I would suggest if you're going to do that consolidated, to me, it would make more sense to have a chief executive, whether that's a manager form, and that's what Butte Anaconda or Butte Silver Bow is looking at right now. Do we want to continue electing our chief executive, or do we want to go to the manager form where we're hiring someone based on merit? My suggestion would be, if you're looking at consolidating over the long haul, I would strongly consider bringing someone on that can operate that county and the complexity of the county and the municipality. And that's not having 3 elected folks from the community to do that, but have 3 or 5 or 7 elected officials be the legislative branch that are thinking about policy and direction and budget, but then hire someone to come on and be that chief executive that can run the city and the county and the complexity that brings on, and not have just relying on someone from town being elected to do that. That's my suggestion. As you're looking at consolidating, I would look at you could, but I would suggest for operations sake that I would consider looking at the commission manager form of government would be more appropriate than the commission form, which is an option, or the commission executive form, which is an option as well. So all of those forms of government would be an option for a consolidated city county form of government, except the town meeting form is not an option. Well, no, it's not, because it's only available to municipalities and not, I wouldn't think it would be available to consolidated. But there are some counties that are less than 2,000 people in population, which is a criteria. Thinking out loud, sorry. I should think inside voice. All right, what else we got? Is that it?
One more question from Joanne. She said Daniels County has a very low tax base. Can you recommend the best way to operate without much money?
Yeah. So those are challenges. And one of the things you can look at are special districts, creating special districts, and are there certain things that the county is doing right now that are being funded by the general fund that you can carve off and say, look, instead of the county doing this out of a general fund, if we created a special district that's its own taxing district, say for, not a great example, but fire districts, right? You create a fire district and that's its own taxing district. And that could, so I'm trying to think, what are some of the services? So you could do a public health district that could be its own taxing district. That could, I wonder if that would be a possibility. But anyway, they would be able to tax and generate more revenue to provide that service. So you're taking it out of the general fund and you're putting it out as a special district, a road district. We're going to create a road district. Rather than having all the roads maintained out of the general fund, we're going to divide up the county into smaller districts and have those be taxing districts that we can collect additional taxes in addition to the general fund specific for road maintenance. And so the money that you're spending on the general fund to support road maintenance could now come from that road district, and they could generate additional taxes. But the only way Daniels County is going to be funded is through taxes, right? And I know you've got a ton of state land. And so you're just putting a greater and greater burden on those same tax folks that are the private property, taxable property. So if they're unwilling to be taxed more, and that's kind of the conundrum, right? Is the state lands aren't generating any tax revenue for you, but you still have to maintain a lot of roads and things that aren't being generated from state land because they don't pay taxes. So that, Daniels County is a really challenging environment for revenue. You're just putting greater burden on those freehold taxpayers. But if they're willing to say, yeah, just find more ways to increase, or they can do a voted in mill levy and say, just increase our tax us more to provide more in our general fund. And Petroleum County did that. Petroleum County went to their voters and said, look, our general fund is not sufficient to maintain operations anymore. And the voters voted in additional mills, added the mills, more taxes to support just basic operations of the county. So it's possible, but everybody has to be on board to recognize, okay, we see that there isn't enough money to do general basic operations of the county. And we want a greater level of service than what you can currently provide at the level of taxes. So in order for us to get better services, we need to pay more in taxes. And this, yeah, and it just puts a greater burden on fewer people because there's not that much private property because it's a lot of state property. Oh, if that helps, Daniels County. It's probably Joanne asking that question.
Yeah. Timmy said cemetery district.
Cemetery districts are again the same thing. They're a taxing authority that they can generate. They could generate additional taxes just to support the cemetery. So then if the county in their general fund is supporting cemeteries, the cemetery district could then add additional tax to support just the cemeteries. And then whatever this general fund was being used to support cemeteries would then be freed up. So free up more money in the general fund to do other things, because now the revenue that's supporting the cemeteries is being generated separately from the general fund. It's the best way on a Monday morning I can explain that.
Greg's got a comment. He said, I thought that consolidation of city county governments would allow for greater coordinated use of more funds than one government could raise.
Yeah, so that could be so that would be a really thoughtful, and it probably takes some study to look at, is there some consolidation of services that would make sense that you could save money? So Public Works Department is being supported solely by like Scobie, right? In Flaxville, I don't know what but if it became a city county of Scobie, Flaxville all join in with Daniels County, then you can leverage those funds and probably be more efficient and make them go further. So we're not having to duplicate a Public Works Department in 2 municipalities and basically a road department. But now we can have one department that oversees all of it. And there might be some efficiencies there in the use of equipment, an allocation of resources, and you've got different tax bases. But at the end of the day, the citizens in Scobie and Flaxville are paying county taxes. And they're also paying municipal taxes. So on top of that, where county folks are just paying county taxes, they're not paying any municipal taxes. So it'd be an interesting review to look at how revenue would change with consolidation in mind, what revenue might look like. But I think there could be some efficiencies. Not that you couldn't do those things now. Through interlocal agreements, you can find efficiencies there as well. That, you can consolidate through interlocal agreement the public works work of the city and the counties, the cities in the county. You can do that now. But that's not a requirement that's not a change of government. That's a political will of the cities and county elected officials to do that, independent of the voters. So it wouldn't be a change of government to do an interlocal agreement to consolidate services.
We've got a couple comments here. One, Daniels County already has fire road cemetery districts. Another about interlocal agreements. They are a bit tedious to negotiate and have to be annually renewed. And then we have another question here. Could you make districts for city expenses so that county taxpayers didn't have to cover them?
Yeah, so cities could create special improvement districts, SIDs. There's ways that they can create, and what they're not taxes in a special improvement district is not a tax. It is an assessment or a fee for a service. So like street lighting, they have special improvement districts for street lighting. Everyone pays a certain, like say 50 cents for every linear foot of frontage of their lot. So you have a 100-foot lot and you're going to pay 50 cents on that lot. So you're paying $50. Is that right? It's $50 every year. And that goes to support streetlights. And so that's additional revenue that's being generated by the city. That's not coming from taxes. It's coming from a fee that's assessed on property owners for a specific service. There are some that have created special improvement districts for sidewalks and urban trees, right? A lot of urban, boulevard trees that have grown up and broken up sidewalks has created a big mess. And so it's expensive to cut down old cottonwood trees, and it's expensive to come and fix those sidewalks that have been torn up by those roots of the trees. And so the city doesn't have any money in the general fund. The adjacent homeowner doesn't have any money to do it. So what they'll do is they'll create a special improvement district. So everybody in town pays into a specific fund that goes in there to fix sidewalks and remove high hazard trees. And then the city goes through with the tree board, assesses where is the best use of our limited dollars we collect each year. And they say, okay, each year we're going to take care of a block. And they say, which is the worst block? We're going to cut down those trees. We're going to fix those sidewalks. We'll put in more appropriate trees or leave no trees, but usually put in different trees that do not have the roots that tear up the sidewalk. And they'll go through and address some of those issues that they can't address out of the general fund because there's just not enough money in the general fund. So they create the special improvement district to generate new revenue to create a specific service. And then they'll slowly work their way through town fixing, or they have a road, an SID for roads. They do chip sealing of the roads, and they develop a system where they do every 5 years, all the roads in town will be chip sealed. And they do so many roads every year, and they generate enough money in that special, the SID, enough money to do, 10 blocks. And every year they do 10 blocks. And after the 5 years, they get all 50 blocks of the town's chip sealed. And that's a maintenance thing, right? And it's cheaper to do that than it is to replace them every 50 years when you got to go through and anyway. So those are strategies. Special improvement districts are a way to generate additional funds. Or like a recreation district is another one, like for your pools. You probably have a lot of people beyond just those that live in town that are accessing and using your parks and your pools. So it is not uncommon for the cities to work with counties to say, let's create a recreation district that might be most of the county or all of the county, but it's a district that generates revenue to support some of these recreation amenities that might help support the city pool, maybe the county fairground, some of those other recreational facilities that the whole county benefits from. Library districts are another one. So if you're paying money out of your general fund, maybe you could create a library district that then has its own taxing authority that can generate additional revenue that could support the library. And then that would reduce the amount of money that you would be spending to the library each year out of your general fund. It would free up that money to do some other service in town. So just a few ideas. There's none of them are really great. It's just, I think we're just chronically underfunded, and people just don't want to spend money on taxes, but they're frustrated with the level of service they have. And so until we can square those round the corners, around those square corners, whatever, there's going to be this discontent in our communities. Anything else, Lydia?
Nope, that's the end of the questions and comments.
So if you're still online, folks up there in Scobey and Daniels County, I'm hoping to schedule a loop in that area in June, or sometime in May or June. So why don't we circle back and figure out a time where I could go up there in that northeast corner and hit a bunch of municipalities and counties that are doing the local government review, or you can come together and we can do a training for you as study commissioners, or I can do hearings or community engagement events with your citizens to talk about some of these issues and what are some options. And so anyway, be thinking about how to best deploy my time up in that corner, because I think you need some support. Same at the northwest corner, Libby, Lincoln County. I don't know if they're on, Troy, Eureka. I'll probably go travel around that area and try to hit some of those concentrated spots, leverage my time. So be thinking about coordinating and when we can do a visit up in that region. So anyway, thanks for joining us. I guess we'll wrap this up if there's no other questions. Appreciate your time, appreciate your service. I know this can be somewhat frustrating and daunting. To just take it a little bit at a time. have lots of conversations with the public, get some feedback and input. And if there's ways in which we can, we could do a webinar for your whole community if you want, whatever ways we could support you, or I could drive out there and we can sit down with a bunch of folks and talk about these things, see what we can do to put something on the ballot that will make sense for your community and get some, general support from your voters. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and close, and we'll send you out a link to this later on if there's more things you want to review, if not everybody could participate in your study commission. So anyway, thanks for showing up, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. That's the last one of this series. We'll talk about what it takes to wrap this whole thing up, reports, and how to finalize your efforts and get things on the ballot. So that'll be in another 2 weeks on another Monday morning at 10 o'clock. So until then, have a great week, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everyone.